So we're pleased to have Jaap Scholten with us tonight. He made his debut in 1995 with his successful and acclaimed novel entitled 80. From then on, he devoted himself entirely to writing, including work for television. His second novel, entitled Morning Star, about the 1977 train hijack in Drenthe by Moluccan separatists, was published in 2001. Scholten has lived in Hungary for several years, where he writes columns and letters that appear in NRC Handelsblad and other publications. Spengler's Law was his long-awaited third novel. Tonight he's going to be reading from his nonfiction work entitled Comrade Baron, which was a finalist for the 2011 Bob Denoyle VPRO Best Travel Book, and which won the 2011 Libris History Prize. Jaap Scholten.
Thank you, Jack, for hosting me here.
It's my pleasure.
I will read from this book, Comrade Baron. I live in Budapest and I moved there 10 years ago. And my wife is Hungarian from a noble family, and through her I met many people and I heard the stories of the people, what happened to the aristocracy in Hungary and in Romania. And at a certain moment I thought I have to collect these stories before this whole generation dies out. This book was conceived by doing a lot of interviews with people, and most of the people I returned to many times. And there's one lady, she's called Erzsébet in the book. It's a pseudonym, it's not her real name because she didn't want to be with her name in the book, who I became very attached to, and I spoke with her many, many times. And I wanted to catch the stories of an old Europe, of the time of Eastern and Central Europe before communism. And then the book is in three parts. The first part is the stories before communism, then the second part is what happened to these people during communism, and the third part is after communism, how it's going with these people. And I will read four parts from the different periods. For me, the world that I found and the stories that I heard were for me, the Netherlands is a very egalitarian country, so it was a kind of a magic world that opened. This is what Erzsébet told me about. She grew up, she was born as a countess on a castle in Transylvania, not so far from Kolosvar. It is quite to the west. Nikolai the pet bear. Some family photographs were returned to Erzsébet by a villager she met in the street. Black and white pictures with white etching, the first of them showing a large white pelican on a lawn. The second photograph is of a little girl with a roe deer, and that little girl is Erzsébet. The deer used to come indoors. We fed them chocolate, and their hoofs slipped on the parquet, making them do the splits. That's my father with Nikolai. He was still young then. Yeah, you can see here. Here's Nikolai. It's a bear. It's a Carpathian brown bear, but he's small.
Their pet bear.
Yeah, he was, but it was a wild bear. Later he grew bigger than father. Nikolai was brought to us as a cub, just a few days old. He had been found close to the Russian border, which is why he was called Nikolai with an I. My father had an extraordinary relationship with animals. They instantly felt at ease with him. People would bring him all the injured creatures, or stray young from far and wide, found by villagers in the fields or by lumberjacks and gamekeepers in the woods. We had an entire zoo at the house in the park. Whenever a young animal was brought to us, father immediately showed it to all others, one by one, and let them calmly snuffle at it. And to me that is a kind of a metaphor for a multicultural society, where, like in the Netherlands, we have some issues with it. We used to be a very open society, but I think this is actually the basic thing. People should snuffle at each other, just like these animals in the zoo. That was the secret. That's why they didn't hurt one another. The deer, the cats and the birds all lived and slept in the same compound. Only the wolves had a stone house with straw. They were with us for 20 years. One day, when Father was away hunting in the Danube Delta, the foresters brought us a young wildcat from the mountains in a jute sack. He was tiny, curled up in a ball. We called him Pikush. When I tried to pick him up, he instantly lashed his claws at me and escaped. My brother and I searched all day for Pikush, but we couldn't find him anywhere. The next morning, as soon as I heard from the servants that Father was back from the Delta, I ran to his study. He was bent over his desk, working with Nikolai on the parquet next to his chair, lying there snoring with his front paws spread wide as always. I told him excitedly that the little wildcat had been brought in, that it had escaped and it wouldn't survive if we couldn't find it. Father said, "Shh, you will wake him up shouting like that." On his lap lay Pikush, rolled up asleep on a cushion. He told me to take Pikush through the zoo so that all the animals could smell him. The jay clattered its beak, that was all. Then I was sent to the attic to fetch a basket. Father put the basket down next to Nikolai, convinced he wouldn't harm Pikush, and sure enough, after 2 days they were starting playing together. Pikush clawed at Nikolai, who gave him a gentle tap. The little cat slid a meter across the parquet and ran straight back. When Father was away, Nikolai would sit on the sofa on the covered terrace waiting for him. Father had a preference for small cars. They were good for the narrow mountain roads. Nikolai would travel with him in those open-topped cars in the front seat, resting his paw on the door. My brother and I sat in the back, without hats. We drove all over the country like that. Father raced alone at 120 kilometers an hour. Everyone knew him. As a girl, I used to lie on top of Nikolai for hours. Of all the animals, he was the only one that slept in the house. He had his own room with a large square divan with pillows where he spent the night. He could open doors. When visitors arrived from Kolozsvár, we used to send Nikolai to answer the front door. Women especially jumped out of their skins when a 2-meter bear swung the door open. He drank beer from the bottle and sat in armchairs in the living room. He was a full member of the family, but then came the day when he hit the cook in the face. The cook had a bowl of raspberries. Nikolai wanted those raspberries, and she didn't want him to have them, so she pulled the bowl away. That's when Nikolai hit her. He was angry. Her cheek bled, and as soon as there's blood, it's over. Nikolai had been with us for more than 10 years by then. Father left for the mountains the next morning and was gone for 4 days. One of the gamekeepers came. Father had left his revolver at home, and he had explained to the gamekeeper what to do. Play with Nikolai in the park. When he played, he often lay on his back. The gamekeeper was to push the barrel of the revolver deep into his fur. Father had explained which ribs to choose, here at the side, and then pull the trigger. Nikolai would hardly notice. He was buried under the oak tree, where a wild rose grew. No one ever spoke about Nikolai again, just as no one ever spoke about Mother. Things that go too deep, that cause too much pain, those things you keep to yourself.